The bullet that grazed Nathaniel Sterling's shoulder as she rode into White River, Wyoming territory in the summer of 1878 wasn't meant for her, but it changed everything about who she would become. The stray shot from a saloon brawl sent her tumbling from her mare into the dusty street, and when she looked up through the haze of pain and confusion, the first thing she saw was a pair of weathered boots stepping between her and the chaos, their owner's voice cutting through the gunfire with an authority that made even drunk cowboys think twice. "Enough!" The word cracked like a whip, and the shooting stopped. Nathaniel pressed her hand against her bleeding shoulder, her vision swimming as she tried to focus on the man towering above her. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of winter sky. His brown hair needed cutting, falling almost to his collar, and his jaw was set in a hard line that spoke of a man who had seen too much violence and had no patience for more. "Someone fetch Doc Hendricks," he ordered, not taking his eyes off the men stumbling out of the saloon. "And you three, you're spending the night in my jail to cool off." "We didn't mean nothing, Marshal," one of them slurred. "Just having a bit of fun." "Your fun nearly killed an innocent woman." The Marshal's voice dropped to something low and dangerous. "Move." Only then did he turn to Nathaniel, dropping to one knee beside her in the street. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the silver just beginning to thread through his hair at the temples. He was perhaps 30, maybe a year or two more, and when he looked at her, something in his expression softened. "Can you sit up, miss?" His voice was gentler now, though she heard the tension beneath it. "I think so." Her own voice sounded thin to her ears. She had ridden 300 miles to reach White River, fleeing a marriage arrangement her father had made without her consent back in Missouri. She had not come all this way to die in the street from someone else's stupidity. The Marshal helped her sit, his hands careful on her uninjured arm. Blood seeped through her dress sleeve and she felt light-headed looking at it. She had never been good with blood, even her own. "Easy now." He steadied her as she swayed. "Doc's coming, you will be fine. The bullet just grazed you." An older man hurried toward them, black bag in hand, his gray hair wild around his weathered face. "Bring her to my office, Owen." So the Marshal's name was Owen. Nathaniel filed that information away as he lifted her easily, cradling her against his chest as though she weighed nothing. She wanted to protest that she could walk, but the world tilted dangerously, and she found herself grateful for his strength. Doc Hendricks's office smelled of carbolic acid and camphor. Owen set her down on an examination table with surprising gentleness for such a large man. She caught his eyes again as he stepped back, and something passed between them, a flicker of recognition that had nothing to do with having met before and everything to do with seeing another lost soul. "I will be at my office if you need anything, Doc," Owen said, but he hesitated at the door, glancing back at her. "I am sorry you met our town under such circumstances, miss. I promise we are not usually this exciting." Despite her pain, Nathaniel found herself almost smiling. "I have had worse welcomes." His eyebrows rose slightly, curiosity flickering across his features, but then he was gone, and Doc Hendricks was rolling up her sleeve to examine her wound. "You are lucky," the doctor said after a moment. "It is barely more than a deep scratch. I will clean it and bandage it and you will be fine in a few days. Might be sore for a week or so." "Thank you," Nathaniel managed, gritting her teeth as he began to clean the wound. The sting was fierce, bringing tears to her eyes. "What brings you to White River?" Doc Hendricks asked, his tone conversational as he worked. She suspected he was trying to distract her from the pain. "I am looking for work," she said, which was true enough. "I heard there might be opportunities here, running from something or running toward something." The old doctor's eyes were shrewd. Nathaniel met his gaze steadily. Does it matter? I suppose not. He smiled slightly. As it happens, the boarding house could use help. Mrs. Chen, who runs it, has been looking for someone since her last girl got married and moved to Cheyenne. Can you cook? Yes. That, at least, was not a lie. Her mother had died when Nathaniel was 12, and she had taken over the household duties for her father and 3 younger brothers. Cooking was one of the few skills she possessed that might actually prove useful in this new life she was trying to build. Can you clean? Yes. Can you keep accounts? She hesitated, then nodded. Her father had taught her figures, thinking it would make her more valuable to a prospective husband. The irony was not lost on her. Then I will introduce you to Mrs. Chen as soon as I finish here. Doc Hendricks tied off the bandage with practiced efficiency. She is a good woman, fair employer. Came over from China 20 years ago with her husband. He died 5 years back, left her the boarding house. She runs it well, but she is not as young as she used to be. Within an hour, Nathaniel found herself standing in the neat kitchen of Chen's boarding house, facing a small woman with iron gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that seemed to see straight through to her bones. "You are running from a man," Mrs. Chen said flatly. Nathaniel's first instinct was to deny it, but something in the older woman's expression stopped her. "Yes, husband. No, a man my father wanted me to marry." Mrs. Chen nodded slowly. "You will not bring trouble to my house." "I will not," Nathaniel said firmly. "I want to work to build a new life. That is all. The work is hard. Up before dawn cooking breakfast for whoever is staying here. Usually 6 to 8 men. Then cleaning rooms, doing laundry, preparing dinner. I will help, but my knees are not what they used to be. I can do it, Mrs. Chen studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "You start tomorrow. Room and board plus $2 a week. You get Sunday afternoons off." "Thank you." Relief flooded through Nathaniel so intensely she felt dizzy. "Do not thank me yet. Come, I will show you your room." The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the street. It was more than Nathaniel had hoped for. She sank down onto the bed, suddenly exhausted, her shoulder throbbing. "Rest now," Mrs. Chen said from the doorway. "Tomorrow comes early." Nathaniel lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, and allowed herself to feel the reality of what she had done. She had left everything she had ever known, ridden 300 miles on her own, and landed in a strange town where she knew no one. She was injured, nearly penniless, and completely alone, but she was free. That night, she dreamed of winter blue eyes and a voice that could stop bullets. The next morning arrived far too early. Nathaniel's shoulder ached as she dressed in the dim pre-dawn light, fumbling with the buttons of her gray work dress. She had slept fitfully, unused to the sounds of the town, the creaking of the boarding house, the voices of men coming and going at all hours. Mrs. Chen was already in the kitchen when Nathaniel came down, stoking the stove to life. "We feed them at 6, she said without preamble. "Eggs, bacon, biscuits, coffee, sometimes flapjacks if there is time. Dinner is at 6 in the evening. Stew, roast, whatever we can make stretch. There is a chicken coop out back and a good vegetable garden. We buy meat from the butcher twice a week." Nathaniel rolled up her sleeves carefully, mindful of her bandaged shoulder, and set to work. Cooking for her family had prepared her somewhat, but cooking for 8 hungry men on a schedule was different. Mrs. Chen moved around the kitchen with quiet efficiency, showing her where things were kept, how much to make, the particular quirks of the old stove. By the time the first boarders began stumbling down for breakfast, Nathaniel had biscuits in the oven and was frying eggs in 2 large skillets. The men were mostly cowboys, ranch hands from the surrounding spreads who kept rooms in town, along with a couple of merchants and a very quiet man Mrs. Chen identified as a surveyor. They ate with the single-minded focus of men who did hard physical labor, barely looking up from their plates. Nathaniel kept the coffee pot moving, refilled platters and collected empty dishes. Her shoulder protested every movement, but she ignored it. She was carrying a stack of dirty plates back to the kitchen when the door opened and Marshal Owen walked in. He stopped when he saw her, surprise crossing his features. Miss Sterling. So he had learned her name, probably from Doc Hendricks. She felt herself flush slightly under his direct gaze. In the morning light streaming through the windows, she could see him more clearly than she had in the chaos of yesterday. He was handsome in a rough-hewn way, with strong features and those remarkable eyes. He wore his marshal's badge pinned to a dark vest over a blue shirt, and he carried himself with the easy confidence of a man comfortable with his own strength. "Marshal," she said, inclining her head slightly. "Good morning. Doc Hendricks said you might be working here. How is your shoulder?" "Sore but manageable. Thank you for your help yesterday. It was my job." He moved farther into the room, taking a seat at the end of one long table. "And my responsibility. Those men should not have been firing weapons in town. Mrs. Chen emerged from the kitchen, her expression warming slightly when she saw Owen. "Marshal, the usual, please, Mrs. Chen, thank you." Nathaniel carried her dishes to the kitchen, then returned with a clean plate. She served Owen herself, hyper-aware of his presence as she set eggs and bacon and biscuits in front of him. Up close, she caught the scent of soap and leather and something else, maybe gun oil. "Thank you, Miss Sterling," he said, and when she met his eyes, she saw warmth there that made her breath catch slightly. She retreated to the kitchen, scolding herself for acting like a foolish girl. She had not come to White River to moon over the first handsome man who showed her kindness. She had come here for freedom, for a chance to build a life on her own terms. But over the next week, she found herself looking for Owen at breakfast. He came in most mornings around 6:30, after making his rounds of the town. He always sat in the same spot, always ordered the same meal, always thanked her politely when she served him, and he always looked at her as though she was something more than just the woman serving his breakfast. On her first Sunday afternoon off, Nathaniel took a walk through town. White River was small but prosperous, serving the ranches scattered through the surrounding territory. There was a main street with a general store, a bank, 2 saloons, the marshal's office, and a small church. Side streets branched off with houses and shops, everything built of wood that was already weathering gray under the harsh Wyoming sun. She was standing outside the general store, looking at the display in the window, when Owen appeared beside her. "Miss Sterling." He touched the brim of his hat. "Taking in the town. What there is of it," she said, then immediately regretted her tone. "I am sorry, that sounded ungrateful. It is a nice town. It is all right. I know White River is not much compared to wherever you came from." He studied her face. "Doc Hendricks said Missouri." "Yes." "A town called Hartfield." She hesitated, then decided there was no harm in telling him a bit more. "My father had a dry goods store there. But you did not want to stay." It was not really a question, but she answered anyway. "No." Owen was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the mountains visible in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow even in summer. "I came from Illinois," he said finally. "Little town called Millbrook. Left when I was 19 to see the world, ended up wearing a badge and kept wearing it for the last 11 years. Been here in White River for 3. Do you like it?" She was surprised to find herself genuinely curious. "I do. It is a good town, good people. Quiet mostly, except for occasional incidents like the one that brought you and me together." He smiled slightly, transforming his serious face. "What about you? Do you like it so far?" I have barely seen anything beyond the boarding house kitchen, Nathaniel admitted. But yes, I think I do, Mrs. Chen is a good employer. The work is hard but honest. If you want to see more of the area, I could show you around sometime. The words came out a bit rushed, as though he had to force himself to say them. On your afternoon off, I mean, if you would like. Nathaniel's heart did an odd little skip. I would like that. His smile widened, and she realized with a start that he had dimples. Next Sunday, then, I will come by around 2. Yes, that would be nice. They stood there for another moment, neither quite willing to break away, until a shout from down the street made Owen turn his head. His expression shifted instantly from open warmth to professional alertness. I should go, he said, but I will see you next Sunday, Miss Sterling. Nathaniel, she said impulsively. You can call me Nathaniel, Nathaniel. Her name sounded different in his voice, softer somehow. I am Owen Eldridge. I know, she said, then felt herself blush. Mrs. Chen told me. His dimples showed again. I will see you next Sunday, Nathaniel. She watched him stride away, his long legs eating up the distance, and pressed a hand to her chest where her heart was beating far too fast. The week passed in a blur of work. Nathaniel fell into the rhythm of the boarding house, learning the preferences of the regular boarders, growing more confident with the temperamental stove. Her shoulder healed quickly, the soreness fading to a dull ache and then nothing at all. She saw Owen most mornings at breakfast, and they exchanged pleasantries that gradually became brief conversations. She learned that he had a younger sister back in Illinois who wrote him letters he carried in his vest pocket. She learned that he had fought in a few range wars and carried the scars to prove it. She learned that he read books, actual novels, which surprised her somehow. He learned that she had 3 younger brothers she missed desperately despite everything. He learned that she could barely carry a tune but loved music anyway. He learned that she had a quick wit and a sharp tongue when provoked, though she was generally quiet and reserved. By the time Sunday rolled around, Nathaniel was vibrating with anticipation. She changed her dress 3 times before settling on a simple blue cotton that brought out her eyes. Mrs. Chen watched her with amusement. You like the Marshal, the older woman observed. He is nice, Nathaniel said, aiming for casual and missing by a mile. He is a good man. Lonely, I think. This town needs more good women. Too many cowboys, not enough balance. Mrs. Chen handed her a shawl, in case it gets cool this evening. Owen arrived exactly at 2, dressed in clean clothes with his hair still damp from washing. He had left his marshal's badge behind, though Nathaniel noticed he still wore his gun. In this country, she supposed, a man did not go anywhere without it. He had borrowed a buggy, and he helped her up with old-fashioned courtesy before climbing up beside her. The buggy was small enough that their shoulders nearly touched. I thought we could drive out to see the river, he said. If that sounds agreeable, there is a spot upstream that is particularly pretty this time of year. That sounds wonderful. They drove out of town, following a well-worn track that paralleled the river. Owen pointed out landmarks, the boundaries of various ranches, where the best fishing spots were. Nathaniel found herself relaxing, enjoying the warmth of the sun and the easy sound of his voice. The spot he took her to was indeed beautiful. The river widened here, flowing clear and cold over smooth stones, with cottonwood trees providing dappled shade along the banks. Wildflowers bloomed in the grass, purple and yellow and white. Owen helped her down from the buggy and they walked to the water's edge. The sound of the river was soothing, a constant gentle rush. I come here sometimes when I need to think, Owen said. Or when town gets too loud, too full of people and their problems. It must be difficult being Marshal. Everyone's troubles become your troubles. Sometimes. He picked up a smooth stone and skipped it across the water, 3, 4, 5 skips before it sank. But I believe in law and order. Without it, we are just chaos and violence. I have seen what happens in towns without a strong marshal, without justice. It is not pretty. You take it seriously. I do. He looked at her, his expression earnest. Maybe too seriously sometimes. My deputy, Tom, he is always telling me I need to smile more, enjoy life a bit. You smile, Nathaniel said, thinking of his dimples. Not often enough, apparently. But he was smiling now, looking at her in a way that made her feel warm all over. They spent the afternoon by the river, talking about everything and nothing. Owen told her about his childhood in Illinois, growing up on a farm with 3 sisters and 2 brothers. She told him more about Missouri, about her mother's death, and how her father had slowly become someone she did not recognize in his grief, turning hard and controlling. He wanted to marry me off to a man old enough to be my father, she said, staring at the water. A business associate, rich, respectable, cruel. I saw how he looked at me, how he spoke to his servants. I knew what my life would be with him. So you ran. Owen's voice held no judgment, only understanding. So I ran. She looked at him. Do you think less of me for it? No. The word was immediate and firm. I think you were brave. It takes courage to choose your own path, especially when it means leaving everything you know behind. Something tight in Nathaniel's chest loosened. She had been so afraid of judgment, of being seen as a failure or a coward for running. Hearing Owen say she was brave made her want to cry with relief. They talked until the sun began to sink toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Owen drove her back to town reluctantly, and when he helped her down from the buggy in front of the boarding house, his hands lingered on her waist. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "I mean, besides at breakfast." "Yes," Nathaniel said, breathless. "I would like that very much." His smile could have lit the darkening street. "Next Sunday, then. Maybe we could have a picnic." "That sounds perfect." She floated into the boarding house, barely noticing Mrs. Chen's knowing look. The weeks that followed fell into a pattern that made Nathaniel happier than she had been in years. She worked hard during the week, taking pride in her growing skill in the kitchen and the smooth running of the boarding house. Mrs. Chen trusted her more and more, turning over the bookkeeping entirely and often letting Nathaniel handle the cooking on her own. And every Sunday, Owen came to take her out. Sometimes they went back to the river. Sometimes they just walked around town. Once, he took her to a neighboring ranch where a friend of his was breaking horses, and she watched in terrified fascination as Owen helped work with a spirited mare. "You are good at that," she said when he came over to where she was sitting on the fence, his shirt damp with sweat. "Grew up around horses," he said, accepting the canteen she handed him with a grateful smile. "My father bred them. I was in the saddle before I could walk, or so my mother claimed." "Do you miss it? Your family, I mean." His expression grew distant. "Yes and no. I love them, but I never fit there. My brothers and sisters, they were all happy with farm life. Getting up before dawn to milk cows, planting and harvesting, the same thing year after year. It was good, honest work, but I felt like I was suffocating. I needed to see what else was out there." "And did you find it?" He looked at her, his eyes intense. "I am beginning to think I did." The air between them seemed to thicken. They were standing very close, close enough that Nathaniel could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes, could count the days of stubble on his jaw. She wondered what it would feel like if he kissed her, but he stepped back, breaking the moment, and offered her his hand to help her down from the fence. "We should head back. I promised Mrs. Chen I would have you home before dark." As summer deepened into early autumn, Nathaniel realized she was falling in love with Owen Eldridge. It crept up on her gradually, in the way her heart lifted when she saw him at breakfast, in how she found herself telling him things she had never told anyone, in the way his rare smiles felt like gifts meant just for her. She thought, hoped, that he might feel the same way. She caught him watching her sometimes with an expression of such open longing, it made her breath catch. He found excuses to touch her, offering his hand to help her over rough ground, brushing a strand of hair from her face, steadying her with a hand at the small of her back. But he never pushed for more, never tried to kiss her or speak of deeper feelings. Nathaniel told herself to be patient, that Owen was a careful man who would not rush into something as important as love. Then, in early October, everything changed. Nathaniel was at the general store, purchasing flour and sugar for the boarding house, when she felt someone watching her. She turned to find a stranger staring at her, a well-dressed man with cold eyes and a thin mouth. Recognition slammed into her like a physical blow. Edmund Hayes. The man her father had wanted her to marry. She must have made a sound because the storekeeper, Mr. Patterson, looked at her with concern. "Miss Sterling, are you all right?" "I am fine," she managed, though her hands were shaking as she gathered her purchases. "Just feeling a bit unwell." She hurried out of the store, praying that Edmund had not recognized her, that it was just a terrible coincidence that he was in White River. But when she glanced back, she saw him speaking to Mr. Patterson, pointing in her direction. Terror flooded through her. She half ran back to the boarding house, her mind racing. She should pack, should leave immediately, but where would she go? She had only a little money saved, not enough to get far. Mrs. Chen took one look at her face and pulled her into the kitchen. "What happened?" "The man my father wanted me to marry, he is here, in town." Nathaniel's voice came out thin and high. "He saw me at the store, he knows I am here." "Will he try to take you back?" "I do not know. Maybe, probably." Nathaniel pressed her hands to her face. "I thought I had gotten far enough away. I thought I was safe. You need to talk to the marshal." "No." The word came out sharper than she intended. "I cannot involve Owen in this. It is my problem." Mrs. Chen's expression was stern. "It is not just your problem if this man means you harm. The marshal needs to know." But before Nathaniel could argue further, someone knocked on the front door of the boarding house. Mrs. Chen went to answer it, and Nathaniel heard a man's voice asking for her. Not Edmund's voice, though. Someone else. She stepped into the front room to find a young man in an expensive suit holding an envelope. "Miss Nathaniel Sterling." "Yes. I am Mr. Collins, attorney at law. I represent your father, Mr. Robert Sterling of Hartfield, Missouri. I have been asked to deliver this to you." He held out the envelope. With shaking hands, Nathaniel took it. The young attorney tipped his hat and left. She stared at the envelope as though it might bite her. "Open it," Mrs. Chen said quietly. The letter was in her father's handwriting, his script as precise and controlled as everything else about him. "Nathaniel," it began, "you have caused me and your brothers great distress with your selfish and thoughtless flight. I do not know what foolish notions have gotten into your head, but this behavior is unacceptable. Mr. Hayes has graciously agreed to still honor our arrangement despite the embarrassment you have caused him. He has traveled to White River to bring you home. You will return with him and marry him as agreed. If you do not come willingly, I will have no choice but to have you declared mentally incompetent and placed in Mr. Hayes's care as your legal guardian until such time as you become his wife. Do not force my hand in this matter. Come home, marry as arranged, and we will speak no more of this unfortunate episode. Your father." Nathaniel read it twice, each word sinking into her like a stone. Mentally incompetent, legal guardian. He could actually do it. In 1878, a father had enormous power over an unmarried daughter. If he could convince a judge that she was not of sound mind, that she needed male guardianship, she would have no legal recourse. "What does it say?" Mrs. Chen asked. Nathaniel handed her the letter, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. She felt trapped, cornered, all the freedom she had fought for dissolving like smoke. Mrs. Chen read quickly, her lips pressing into a thin line. "This is wrong. You are a grown woman. He cannot do this to you." "He can," Nathaniel said dully. "The law is on his side. An unmarried woman is essentially her father's property until she becomes her husband's property. Unless I am married to someone else, he can force me back." "Then marry someone else." Nathaniel laughed, a bitter sound. "Who? I have been here barely 3 months. I know almost no one." Mrs. Chen looked at her steadily. "You know the Marshal. I cannot ask Owen to marry me just to save me from my father." The thought was horrifying and tempting in equal measure. That would be using him. It would not be fair. Would he see it that way? Before Nathaniel could answer, there was another knock at the door. This time, when Mrs. Chen opened it, Edmund Hayes stood there, with the young attorney behind him. Edmund was in his 50s, with silver threading through his dark hair and a paunch straining the buttons of his expensive coat. His eyes were the same cold gray Nathaniel remembered, and when he saw her, his thin mouth curved in something that was not quite a smile. "Nathaniel, my dear, how relieved I am to have found you." His voice was smooth, cultured, and utterly false. "You have given us all quite a scare." "I am not going back with you." She was proud that her voice did not shake. Now, you are overwrought, which is understandable. This has all been very trying for you, I am sure." He stepped into the boarding house as though he had every right. "Your father has explained about your nervous condition. I assure you, I bear you no ill will for it. We will be married, and I will take good care of you." "I do not have a nervous condition," Nathaniel said through gritted teeth. "And I will not marry you." Edmund's expression hardened slightly. "Mr. Collins, please show Miss Sterling the legal documents her father has prepared." The young attorney opened his case and pulled out several papers. "Miss Sterling, these are guardianship papers signed by your father and approved by a judge in Missouri. They state that you are to be placed in the care of Mr. Edmund Hayes until such time as you are married to him. He has full legal authority to make decisions on your behalf." "Those papers are worthless here," Mrs. Chen said sharply. "This is Wyoming territory, not Missouri." "Actually, under the laws governing interstate matters, they are quite valid," Mr. Collins said apologetically. "Mr. Hayes has every legal right to take Miss Sterling into his custody." "The hell he does." Nathaniel spun around to find Owen standing in the doorway, his marshal's badge glinting in the lamplight. His face was set in hard lines, his eyes cold as he looked at Edmund Hayes. "Marshal Eldridge," Edmund said smoothly. "How good of you to join us. Perhaps you can help Miss Sterling understand that she needs to accept reality." "What I understand," Owen said, his voice dangerously quiet, "is that you are attempting to force a woman to go somewhere she does not want to go. That sounds like kidnapping to me." "I have legal documents," Edmund began, but Owen cut him off. "I do not care if you have a letter from President Hayes himself. She says she is not going with you. That is the end of it." Edmund's facade cracked slightly, showing the anger beneath. "She is my legal ward. You have no authority to interfere. I have all the authority I need. This is my town. She is under my protection." Owen moved further into the room, his hand resting casually on his gun belt in a way that was anything but casual. "I am going to ask you gentlemen to leave now." "This is not over," Edmund said, his voice tight with fury. "I will go to the territorial judge. I will get local enforcement of these papers, and I will take what is mine." "She is not a thing to be owned," Owen said, and there was such cold rage in his voice that even Edmund took a step back. "Get out of my town." The attorney was already backing toward the door, clearly wanting no part of whatever was about to happen. Edmund held Owen's stare for another moment, then turned on his heel and left, his expensive boots loud on the wooden floor. The silence after they left was deafening. Nathaniel felt as though all the air had been sucked from the room. She swayed slightly, and Owen was there instantly, his hands on her shoulders, steadying her. "Are you all right?" His face was close to hers, his eyes searching. "No," she whispered. "No, I am not all right." "He is going to take me back, Owen. He has the law on his side. I will end up married to him, and there is nothing I can do to stop it." "There is one thing you can do," Owen said quietly. She looked up at him, saw the intensity in his eyes, and understood what he was suggesting before he said it. "Marry me," he said. "Marry me, and your father's guardianship papers become void. You will be my wife under my protection, and there will be nothing Edmund Hayes or your father can do about it." Nathaniel's heart hammered in her chest. "Owen, I cannot ask you to do that. It is too much. You would be tying yourself to me just to save me from them, and that is not fair to you. You are not asking. I am offering." His hands tightened slightly on her shoulders. "Nathaniel, I have been trying to find the courage to speak to you about my feelings for weeks now. I am not good with words, not good at expressing what is in my heart, but I think you know. You must know how I feel about you. Owen." His name came out as barely more than a breath. "I have been in love with you since that first morning when you served me breakfast and looked at me like I was a man, not just a badge. I wake up thinking about you. I go to sleep thinking about you. When I am making my rounds, I find myself hurrying just so I can get to the boarding house and see you." His voice roughened with emotion. "I was going to court you properly, take my time, do this right. But if you need me now, if you need my protection, my name, then it is yours. It has always been yours." Tears spilled down Nathaniel's cheeks. "I love you too," she whispered. "I have loved you for so long I cannot remember when it started, but I do not want you to marry me out of obligation. I want you to marry me because you want to, because you cannot imagine your life without me, not because you are trying to save me." "Then it is settled," Owen said, and he was smiling now, his whole face transformed with joy. "Because I cannot imagine my life without you. Will you marry me, Nathaniel Sterling? Will you be my wife, not just so I can protect you from Edmund Hayes, but because I love you and want to spend the rest of my days making you happy?" "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, and she did not care. She wrapped her arms around his neck and held on, feeling safe for the first time in months. Mrs. Chen cleared her throat delicately, and they pulled apart, both flushing. The older woman was smiling. "I will go make tea," she said. "I think we could all use some tea." Owen kept hold of Nathaniel's hand, threading his fingers through hers. "We should get married as soon as possible, tomorrow if we can manage it. The sooner you are legally my wife, the sooner those papers of your father's become worthless." "Tomorrow," Nathaniel agreed. "Do you think the minister will marry us on such short notice, Reverend Matthews? If I explain the situation, I think he will understand. And if he will not, we will find someone who will." Owen lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "You are going to be Nathaniel Eldridge." The name sent a thrill through her. "I like the sound of that." That night, lying in her small room, Nathaniel stared at the ceiling and tried to wrap her mind around everything that had happened. This morning, she had been a woman running from her past, with no clear future beyond the next day's work. Now she was engaged to be married to a man she loved desperately, a man who loved her in return. Part of her whispered that it was too fast, too sudden, that they should take more time. But another part, the part that had been listening to Owen's voice every morning over breakfast, watching the way he moved, learning the landscape of his heart through hours of conversation, knew that time was not what mattered. She knew Owen in the ways that counted. She knew his honor, his kindness, his strength. She knew that he read poetry when he thought no one was watching and that he was gentle with children and animals. She knew that he took his responsibilities seriously and that when he made a promise, he kept it. She knew that he loved her, and that was enough. The next morning, Owen arrived at the boarding house before dawn, before even the earliest risers were awake. Nathaniel was in the kitchen starting breakfast when she heard his knock. She went to the door, wiping flour from her hands, and found him standing there looking nervous in the gray pre-dawn light. "I could not sleep," he admitted. "I kept thinking you might change your mind." "I could not sleep either," she said, "but not because I was changing my mind. Because I was too excited about becoming your wife." His smile was brilliant, washing away the nervousness. "I spoke to Reverend Matthews last night after I left here. He agreed to marry us this morning at 8 before regular services. I also spoke to Judge Hawkins, who is a friend of mine. He will file the paperwork immediately. By noon today, you will legally be Nathaniel Eldridge and your father's guardianship papers will be invalid." "What about Edmund Hayes? Do you think he will try to stop the wedding?" Owen's expression hardened. "Let him try. I will deal with him if he does." Mrs. Chen appeared in the hallway already dressed. "Good morning, Marshal. I assume you are here to collect your bride." "Not yet. The wedding is at 8, but I wanted to make sure Nathaniel knew I had not changed my mind either." "As if you would," Mrs. Chen said with a snort. "The way you two look at each other, I am surprised you did not run off to get married weeks ago." She turned to Nathaniel. "Go get ready. Wear your blue dress, the one you wore on your first outing with the marshal. It brings out your eyes." Nathaniel hesitated. "But breakfast, I will handle breakfast. This is your wedding day. Go." In her room, Nathaniel washed carefully and put on the blue dress. She wished she had something finer, something more appropriate for a wedding, but this would have to do. She brushed her dark hair until it shone, leaving it loose down her back because Owen had once mentioned he liked it that way. When she came back downstairs, Owen's expression made her feel beautiful. "You look perfect," he said, his voice rough. They walked together through the quiet morning streets to the small church at the end of town. Reverend Matthews was waiting, along with Judge Hawkins and Doc Hendricks. Owen's deputy, Tom, was there too, a stocky young man with friendly eyes who grinned when he saw them. "About time, boss," Tom said. "I was beginning to think you were never going to work up the nerve to propose." "It just took the right motivation," Owen said, his hand warm in Nathaniel's. Mrs. Chen arrived with a small bouquet of late-season wildflowers from her garden, pressing them into Nathaniel's hands. "Every bride should have flowers," she said. Then they were standing before Reverend Matthews, with Owen holding both of her hands, and the minister was speaking the words that would bind them together. Nathaniel heard her own voice, surprisingly steady, promising to love and honor and cherish. She heard Owen make the same promises, his voice strong and sure. "By the power vested in me by the Wyoming Territory, I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Matthews said. "You may kiss your bride, Marshal." Owen cupped Nathaniel's face in his hands, his touch gentle, and kissed her. It was soft and sweet and full of promise, and when they pulled apart, Nathaniel saw her own joy reflected in his eyes. "Hello, Mrs. Eldridge," he whispered. "Hello, husband." They signed the papers that made it official with Judge Hawkins and Doc Hendricks as witnesses. The judge promised to file everything with the territorial clerk within the hour. "And if anyone comes asking questions," Judge Hawkins said, looking at Owen meaningfully. "This wedding happened entirely legally and appropriately. I will swear to that in any court." "Thank you, Judge," Owen said, shaking his hand. They walked out of the church into the brightening morning, and Nathaniel felt as though she was floating. She was married. She was Owen's wife. Edmund Hayes could do nothing to her now. As if summoned by her thoughts, she saw Edmund standing across the street, watching them with an expression of pure fury. The attorney, Mr. Collins, stood beside him, looking uncomfortable. Owen saw them too. His arm came around Nathaniel's shoulders, pulling her close against his side. "Stay here," he said quietly, then walked across the street to confront them. Nathaniel watched, her heart in her throat, as Owen spoke to Edmund. She could not hear what was being said, but she could see Edmund's face reddening, could see him gesturing angrily. Owen stood calm and still, saying very little, just letting Edmund rage. Finally, Owen spoke a few words, gestured to the church, and walked back to Nathaniel, leaving Edmund staring after him. "What did you say?" Nathaniel asked. "I told him you were married." "I told him his guardianship papers were worthless. I told him he had until sundown to leave my town, or I would arrest him for disturbing the peace." Owen's jaw was set in a hard line. "He is not happy, but there is nothing he can do. You are my wife now, under my protection. He has no claim on you." Nathaniel sagged with relief. "It is really over. It is really over." Owen turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. "You are free, Nathaniel. You are safe. No one is going to take you anywhere you do not want to go." She threw her arms around his neck, holding him tight, feeling the solidity of him, the realness. This man was her husband. This incredible, honorable, strong man had married her, had given her his name and his protection, had told her he loved her. "Thank you," she whispered against his shoulder. "Thank you for saving me. You saved yourself when you had the courage to run," he said, his arms around her waist. "I just gave you a safe place to land." Mrs. Chen insisted on hosting a wedding breakfast at the boarding house. Most of the regular boarders were there, along with Tom and Doc Hendricks, and a few other townspeople who had heard about the wedding and wanted to offer congratulations. It was simple and chaotic and wonderful, and Nathaniel felt surrounded by warmth and goodwill. But eventually, it was just her and Owen, standing in the boarding house kitchen. She was suddenly nervous, realizing that she was married to this man and had barely even kissed him. "I should probably mention," Owen said, rubbing the back of his neck in a gesture of nervousness she found endearing, "that I have a house. It is not much, just a small place on the edge of town. I bought it last year, thinking maybe someday I would have a family to put in it. I have not spent much time there, honestly. I usually just sleep in the back room at the marshal's office." "I would like to see it," Nathaniel said. "Now," he looked surprised. "Now, it is my home now, is it not? I should see where I am going to be living." They walked through town together, and Nathaniel noticed people noticing them, the news of their marriage clearly already spreading. Some folks smiled and nodded. Others looked curious or surprised. She kept her head high, her hand tucked into the crook of Owen's arm. The house was indeed small, a neat wooden structure with 2 rooms downstairs and a loft above. It had a small front porch and a yard that would be perfect for a garden. Inside, it was sparsely furnished but clean, with a stove in one corner, a table and chairs, a sofa that looked new, and a large bed in the back room that made Nathaniel's cheeks heat. "I know it is not much," Owen started, but she cut him off. "It is perfect. It is ours." He looked at her, and something in his expression shifted, grew more intense. "Nathaniel, I want you to know that I do not expect anything. I mean, I know we got married quickly, for practical reasons as much as romantic ones, and I do not want you to feel obligated to that. Is to say," she kissed him, rising up on her toes to press her lips to his, silencing his awkward stumbling over words. He made a surprised sound, then his arms came around her, pulling her close, and he kissed her back with a hunger that stole her breath. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that for months." "I have been wanting you to do it for months," she admitted. "I love you," he said. "I want you to know that whatever happens between us, however this marriage evolves, I love you. That is real." "I love you too," Nathaniel said. "And Owen, I do not feel obligated, I feel lucky." She took his hand and led him to the bedroom. And if there was awkwardness in the beginning, it dissolved quickly into tenderness and joy, and a connection that felt deeper than mere physical pleasure. Afterward, lying in Owen's arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Nathaniel thought about how strange life was. A few months ago, she had been terrified and alone, running toward an uncertain future. Now she was married to a man she loved, safe and protected, with a home of her own. "What are you thinking?" Owen's voice rumbled through his chest. "That I am happy," she said simply. "Happier than I have ever been." His arms tightened around her. "Good, that is all I want, to make you happy." Over the next few weeks, they settled into married life with surprising ease. Nathaniel continued to work at the boarding house, though Mrs. Chen insisted on paying her more now and giving her more time off. Owen continued his work as marshal, keeping the peace in White River with his quiet authority. Edmund Hayes left town as Owen had ordered, though not before attempting to file a complaint with Judge Hawkins about the marriage. The judge firmly told him that the marriage was legal and binding, and that he should take his complaints back to Missouri. Nathaniel received one more letter from her father, this one even angrier than the first, disowning her entirely. It hurt, reading his words, seeing the finality of his rejection. But Owen held her while she cried, and when she was done, he helped her burn the letter in the stove. "You do not need him," Owen said. "You have me. You have Mrs. Chen and Doc Hendricks and everyone else in this town who has come to care about you. You have a family here, Nathaniel. A chosen family." He was right. Over the weeks and months that followed, Nathaniel found herself building connections, putting down roots. She became friends with the mayor's wife, a brisk woman named Sarah who ran the church charity committee. She became close with a young woman named Elizabeth, who had recently moved to town with her rancher husband. She even started teaching reading and writing to some of the ranch children on Sunday afternoons, a service the community badly needed. And through it all, she and Owen grew closer. She learned his habits, the way he took his coffee, how he liked his shirt starched, that he slept on his left side. He learned hers, that she hummed while she cooked, that she read every book she could get her hands on, that thunderstorms made her anxious. They had their first fight on a cold November evening when Owen came home late with blood on his shirt from breaking up a knife fight at one of the saloons. Nathaniel had been frantic with worry, and when he walked in the door, all her fear came out as anger. "You could have been killed," she shouted at him. "Do you even care what that would do to me?" "It is my job," he said, his own temper rising. "Did you think being married to a marshal would be safe and easy? I did not think being married to a marshal would mean sitting here wondering if my husband was bleeding out in some alley." They stood glaring at each other across the kitchen, both breathing hard. Then Owen's expression crumbled. "You are right," he said quietly. "I am sorry. I should have sent Tom to let you know I was all right. I was not thinking about anything except getting the situation under control." Nathaniel's anger dissolved as quickly as it had come. She crossed the kitchen and wrapped her arms around him, careful of his injuries. "I am sorry, too. I know your job is dangerous. I love you so much, Owen. The thought of losing you terrifies me. I know, I feel the same way about you. He held her close. I will be more careful. I will make sure you know I am safe, even if it is just a quick message. That is all I ask. They made up thoroughly, and afterward, lying tangled together in bed, Owen said, "We are going to be all right, you know. We are going to have fights and make up and build a life together. We are going to be happy." "I know," Nathaniel said, and she did. Winter came to Wyoming with bitter cold and heavy snow. Nathaniel learned to deal with the pot-bellied stove that heated their small house, learned to cook stews that would stretch ingredients when supplies ran low, learned to read the sky for signs of coming storms. On Christmas Eve, Owen came home early from his rounds with a small package wrapped in brown paper. "For you," he said, looking pleased with himself. Nathaniel opened it carefully to find a beautiful hairbrush, the handle made of polished wood with delicate carvings. "Owen, it is beautiful." "Where did you get this?" "I ordered it from a catalog. It took 2 months to arrive." He looked almost shy. "I wanted to give you something special for our first Christmas together." She kissed him, touched by his thoughtfulness. "I have something for you too." She pulled out a wrapped bundle and handed it to him. Inside was a thick wool scarf in dark blue, every stitch sewn by her own hands during the long evenings while he worked late. "You made this." Owen wrapped it around his neck, his face lighting up. "Nathaniel, this is wonderful, thank you." They spent Christmas Day quietly, just the two of them, cooking a small turkey and exchanging stories about Christmases past. It was simple and perfect, and that night, Nathaniel told Owen something she had been keeping to herself for a few weeks. "I think I might be pregnant." He froze, then slowly turned to look at her, his eyes wide. "Pregnant? Are you sure?" "Pretty sure. I have missed 2 courses and I have been feeling sick in the mornings. I was going to wait until I was more certain, but I wanted you to know." Owen's face transformed with wonder and joy. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as though she was made of glass. "A baby, we are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" She needed to hear him say it. "Happy, Nathaniel, I am beyond happy." "I am," he pulled back to look at her, his eyes suspiciously bright. "You have given me everything. A wife I love, a real home, and now a child. I do not have words for what I am feeling right now." "Then show me," she whispered. He did. Doc Hendricks confirmed the pregnancy in early January. "Baby should come sometime in late July or early August," he said, making notes in his record book. "You are healthy and strong, Nathaniel. I do not foresee any problems, but I want you to come see me every month so I can check on you and the baby." Owen insisted on walking her home from the doctor's office, holding her arm as though she might shatter. She found it endearing and exasperating in equal measure. "I am pregnant, not sick," she told him. "I can still walk on my own." "I know. But let me fuss over you a little bit. I am going to be a father. I am entitled to be ridiculously overprotective." Spring came slowly, the snow melting gradually to reveal the greening land beneath. Nathaniel's belly began to swell, and she found herself both excited and terrified about the baby. Owen read every book about childbirth and infant care he could get his hands on, determined to be prepared. In April, Nathaniel received an unexpected letter. It was from her youngest brother, Thomas, who was 16 now. He wrote that their father had died suddenly of a heart attack in February, and that he and her other brothers, Michael and David, wanted to know if she was all right. They had not agreed with their father's attempt to force her to marry Edmund Hayes, and they missed her. Nathaniel cried reading the letter, a confused tangle of grief for her father despite everything, and relief that her brothers still wanted her in their lives. She wrote back immediately, telling them about her marriage to Owen, about the baby coming, about her life in White River. Over the following months, letters flew back and forth. Her brothers sent congratulations and well wishes. Thomas, who was apparently something of an artist, sent a sketch of himself that made Nathaniel laugh and cry at the same time. He looked so much like their mother. "Would you want them to visit?" Owen asked one evening as she read yet another letter from Thomas. "I would love that," Nathaniel admitted. "But it is so far, and I know they do not have much money now that father is gone. Maybe we could send them money for the train ticket, at least for Thomas, since he is the youngest and you seem closest to him." She looked at her husband with so much love she thought her heart might burst. "You would do that, of course. They are your family, which makes them my family. Besides," he smiled, "I would like to meet this brother who writes to you so faithfully." In June, Thomas arrived, a gangly 16-year-old with Nathaniel's dark hair and their mother's smile. He and Owen took to each other immediately, bonding over horses and cards and bad jokes. Having her brother there made Nathaniel feel complete in a way she had not realized she needed. Thomas stayed through the summer, helping Owen around town and spending long hours talking with Nathaniel. He told her that after their father died, Edmund Hayes had tried to claim some debt their father had owed him, but Michael, who was now 23 and managing the store, had been able to prove there was no such debt. "He is a bad man," Thomas said. "I am glad you got away from him, Nathaniel. I am glad you found Marshal Owen." "So am I," she said, rubbing her enormous belly. The baby was due any day now, and she felt huge and uncomfortable, barely able to get around. On a hot afternoon in early August, Nathaniel was in the kitchen trying to cook dinner when the first pain hit. She gasped, gripping the table, and Owen was there immediately. "Is it time?" His face was pale. "I think so. Owen, I am scared." "I know, but Doc Hendricks is ready and I am right here. You are going to be fine." He was trying to sound confident, but she could hear the fear beneath his words. Thomas ran to get the doctor while Owen helped Nathaniel to the bedroom. The next several hours were a blur of pain and fear and encouragement from Owen, who never left her side. He held her hand, wiped her forehead with a cool cloth, whispered words of love and support. Finally, after what felt like forever, Doc Hendricks said, "One more push, Nathaniel. Come on now." She bore down with everything she had, squeezing Owen's hand so hard she was probably hurting him. And then there was a sudden release of pressure and the thin, angry wail of a newborn baby. "It is a boy," Doc Hendricks announced, placing the squalling infant on Nathaniel's chest. "A big, healthy boy." Nathaniel looked down at her son, this tiny, perfect human she and Owen had made, and started to cry. Owen was crying too, pressing kisses to her sweaty forehead, his hand gently touching the baby's downy head. "We have a son," he said, wonder in his voice. "Nathaniel, we have a son." They named him James after Owen's father. He was a good baby, quiet and calm, with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. Owen was besotted, spending every free moment holding his son, talking to him, showing him off to anyone who would look. Thomas stayed for 2 more weeks, helping Nathaniel with the baby and the house while she recovered. Before he left to return to Missouri, he hugged her tight. "I am so glad you are happy," he said. "This is where you belong, I can tell. With Marshal Owen and little James, in this place you have made your own. Come back soon," she told him. "You will always have a home here." Watching Thomas ride away on the stage made her sad, but it was a gentle sadness, tempered by the knowledge that she would see him again. She had her brothers back in her life, even if they were far away. Over the next 2 years, life settled into a peaceful rhythm. James grew from a baby into a toddler, talking and walking and getting into everything. Owen continued his work as marshal, but he made sure to spend as much time as possible with his family. Nathaniel continued her work at the boarding house, though she cut back her hours to care for James. In the spring of 1881, Nathaniel discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier now that she knew what to expect. And in December, she gave birth to a daughter they named Charlotte, a tiny thing with wispy blonde hair and a temper that made Owen laugh. "She is fierce like her mother," he said, holding his daughter with practiced ease now. "I was never fierce until I met you," Nathaniel said. "Yes, you were, you just did not know it yet." He looked at her over Charlotte's head, his eyes soft. "You rode 300 miles on your own to escape a life you did not want. You survived being shot. You built a new life from nothing. You are the fiercest woman I know." She thought about the frightened girl who had ridden into White River 3 years ago, alone and desperate. That girl seemed like a stranger now. She had become someone new here, someone stronger and braver, someone who knew her own worth. But she had not done it alone. She had had help, had been given second chances and opportunities. Most of all, she had been loved. When James was 5 and Charlotte was 3, they moved to a bigger house, one with enough bedrooms for the children and a large kitchen where Nathaniel could cook to her heart's content. Owen had been offered a position as territorial marshal, but after much discussion, he turned it down. "I like White River," he said. "I like our life here. I do not want to uproot our family for more money or prestige. What we have is enough." Nathaniel agreed completely. She had no desire to leave the town that had become her home, the people who had become her family. In 1883, Michael wrote to say that he was getting married to a girl from a nearby town, and would Nathaniel and Owen consider coming to Missouri for the wedding. They made the long journey with 5-year-old James and 3-year-old Charlotte, and it was strange and wonderful to see her childhood home again. The store looked smaller than she remembered. The town seemed provincial compared to the wide openness of Wyoming. But seeing her brothers again, all of them grown men now, filled her with joy. They loved Owen immediately, and they were enchanted with James and Charlotte. At the wedding, Michael pulled her aside. "I am glad you ran away," he said quietly. "Father was wrong to try to force you to marry Hayes. What you have with Owen, the life you have built, that is what a marriage should look like." "Thank you," she said, hugging him tight. "That means more than you know." They stayed in Missouri for 2 weeks, then gratefully returned to Wyoming. As much as she had enjoyed seeing her brothers, Nathaniel realized that Missouri was no longer home. Home was White River. Home was Owen and their children. Home was the life they had built together. More years passed, bringing more changes. Thomas finished school and briefly considered moving to Wyoming to be near Nathaniel, but ended up taking a job with a newspaper in St. Louis instead. He visited when he could, becoming a favorite uncle to James and Charlotte. Doc Hendricks retired, and a younger doctor named Preston took over his practice. Mrs. Chen sold the boarding house to a family from Denver, though she stayed in White River, moving into a small cottage near the church. Owen was elected sheriff when the previous sheriff retired, a position with more authority and a better salary. Through it all, Nathaniel and Owen's love deepened and matured. They had their disagreements, their hard times when money was tight or when Owen faced dangers in his job. But they always came back to each other, always found their way through. When James was 10 and Charlotte was 8, Nathaniel discovered she was pregnant again, a surprise that delighted Owen and made the children excited to have a new sibling. This time, she gave birth to twin boys they named after Owen's brothers, Robert and William. The twins were a handful, identical in looks but opposite in temperament, and they turned the house into cheerful chaos. "4 children," Owen said one evening, watching the twins crawl around the floor while James played with them and Charlotte read in the corner. "We have 4 children. Are you complaining?" Nathaniel asked, amused. "Never. I love our life. I love our family." He pulled her close, kissing her temple. "I love you. Even with the gray hair I am giving you." She tugged lightly at the silver that now threaded through his brown hair. "Even then, you are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen." He grew serious. "Do you remember the day you rode into town, when that bullet grazed your shoulder?" "Of course. I knew that day. I looked at you, and something in me knew you were going to change my life. I was not sure how yet, but I knew." He took her hand, threading their fingers together. "Best thing that ever happened to me, you riding into White River." "Best thing that ever happened to me too," she said softly. When Owen was 45 and Nathaniel was 37, he was offered the position of territorial marshal again. This time, after long discussions with Nathaniel and the children, he accepted. The job meant more travel, more responsibility, but it also meant he could make a real difference in bringing law and order to the territory. James, now 17, announced he wanted to follow in his father's footsteps and become a lawman. Charlotte, 15, declared her intention to become a teacher. The twins, 7 years old, were still figuring out who they wanted to be, but they had time. Nathaniel looked at her family, at the life she had built, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She thought about that terrified girl on a horse, bleeding in the street of an unfamiliar town. She thought about how close she had come to a life of misery with Edmund Hayes. Instead, she had Owen. She had their children. She had this beautiful, messy, wonderful life. One evening, as she and Owen sat on their front porch watching the sun set over the mountains, he said, "Do you ever regret it? Any of it?" "Regret what?" "Leaving Missouri. Marrying me so quickly. The life we have here." She turned to look at him, this man who had saved her and loved her and given her everything. "Owen Eldridge, I have never regretted a single moment. You gave me freedom when I needed it most. You gave me love when I had forgotten what it felt like. You gave me a family, a home, a purpose." "How could I possibly regret any of that?" He smiled, his dimples showing. Even after all these years, those dimples still made her heart skip. "Good, because I do not regret it either. Marrying you was the best decision I ever made. Even though I could barely cook when we met," she teased. "You made me breakfast that first morning at the boarding house, and I fell a little bit in love with you right then. And by the time you cooked me dinner a few weeks later, I was completely gone. I think I knew even then that I was going to marry you." "You proposed before I finished doing the dishes that night," Nathaniel remembered, laughing. "We had only known each other a few months. Sometimes you just know," Owen said simply. "When something is right, when someone is meant to be yours, you just know." "Yes," Nathaniel agreed, leaning against his shoulder. "You just know." They sat together as the sun sank below the mountains and the stars began to appear, and Nathaniel thought about how strange and wonderful life was, how a single moment, a single decision could change everything. How running away had led her to running toward something better. How love, real love, could save you in ways you never expected. The years continued to pass with the steady rhythm of seasons and life. James did indeed become a deputy marshal, working with his father and earning a reputation as a fair and capable lawman. Charlotte went to teachers' college in Cheyenne and came back to White River to teach at the growing school. The twins, Robert and William, ended up taking different paths. Robert became a rancher, buying a spread just outside town, while William surprised everyone by becoming a lawyer. Nathaniel watched her children grow and build their own lives with a mixture of pride and melancholy. Where had the time gone? It seemed like just yesterday she was holding baby James, marveling at his tiny fingers and toes. Now he was a man, tall and strong like his father, with a wife of his own and a baby on the way. She was going to be a grandmother. The realization made her laugh and cry at the same time. Owen, now in his 50s, still worked as territorial marshal, though he had slowed down a bit. His hair was more silver than brown now, and he had laugh lines around his eyes and mouth. But he was still strong, still capable, and still looked at Nathaniel as though she was the most precious thing in his world. They had been married 22 years when Owen came home one evening with a troubled expression. Nathaniel was in the kitchen, making bread, and she knew immediately that something was wrong. "What happened?" He sat down heavily at the table. "I got word today. Edmund Hayes died last week in Missouri. Heart failure, apparently." Nathaniel felt a complicated tangle of emotions. Relief that he could never threaten her again. A strange sort of sadness for a life that had been, by all accounts, bitter and lonely. "How do you feel about that? Glad you never had to see him again. Glad he never got the chance to hurt you." Owen reached for her hand, but also just tired. Tired of old battles, old fears. "Then let us leave them behind," Nathaniel said. "Let us focus on the future, on our grandchildren and the life we still have ahead of us." "Our grandchildren," Owen repeated, his expression lightening. "Plural." "Charlotte told me this morning that she is pregnant too." "She did?" Nathaniel felt joy burst through her. "Why did she not tell me?" She wanted to be sure first. "She is about 3 months along. They were going to have 2 grandchildren." The thought filled Nathaniel with wonder. She and Owen, who had started their life together in such chaos and fear, were now the heads of a growing family. They had created something lasting, something good. James and his wife, Emma, had a daughter they named Violet. She had Emma's red hair and James's blue eyes, and Owen was utterly besotted with her. Nathaniel watched her serious husband become putty in the hands of a baby girl, and found it endlessly amusing and touching. Charlotte and her husband, Daniel, had a son they named Matthew. He was a quiet, thoughtful baby who rarely cried and watched the world with solemn dark eyes. Life was full and busy and beautiful. The house that had once echoed with the sounds of Owen and Nathaniel's own children now echoed with grandchildren. Sunday dinners became major events, with all the children and grandchildren gathering around the extended table, talking and laughing and arguing good-naturedly. Nathaniel looked around at her family on one of those Sundays and felt her throat tighten with emotion. This was what she had dreamed of during those dark days in Missouri when her future had looked so bleak. Family, love, belonging. Owen caught her eye across the table and smiled, understanding in his expression. They did not need words anymore. After more than 2 decades together, they could communicate entire conversations with a look. That night, after everyone had gone home and they were cleaning up together, Owen pulled her into his arms and just held her, swaying gently as though they were dancing. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For choosing me, for building this life with me, for giving me everything I never knew I wanted." His arms tightened around her. "I love you, Nathaniel. I have loved you since the moment I saw you, and I will love you until my last breath." "I love you too," she whispered, her face pressed against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Always." When Owen was 60 and Nathaniel was 52, he finally retired from law enforcement. James took over his position as territorial marshal, making both his parents proud. Owen found retirement suited him. He spent his days reading, helping Robert with the ranch, and spoiling his growing number of grandchildren. By then, they had 5 grandchildren, with a 6th on the way. The house was rarely quiet, with children running in and out at all hours. Nathaniel loved it. She had gone from being an only child to having a house full of children and grandchildren, and she cherished every noisy, chaotic moment. One afternoon, as she and Owen sat on the porch watching some of the grandchildren play in the yard, she said, "Do you ever think about how different our lives could have been?" "All the time," Owen admitted. If you had not come to White River, if I had not been there that day, if I had not had the courage to propose, if I had not said yes, you would have said yes, Owen said with confidence. You loved me even then. I did, she agreed. I was terrified and running for my life, and I still fell in love with you. Best decision you ever made. He was grinning. Second best, she corrected. The best decision was running in the first place. The second best was falling in love with you. I will take second place, Owen said, pulling her close. As long as I get to keep you. They sat together, hands intertwined, watching their legacy play in the yard. This was what they had built together. This was what love could create, given time and nurturing and fierce protection. As the sun set over the Wyoming mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Nathaniel thought about that young woman who had ridden into White River so many years ago. She had been looking for freedom, for a chance to choose her own path. She had found so much more than that. She had found home. She had found purpose. She had found a love that had sustained her through everything life threw at them, and it had all started with one act of courage, one desperate flight toward an uncertain future. No, Nathaniel thought. It had started even before that. It had started with a marshal who had stepped between her and danger, who had looked at her with winter blue eyes and seen someone worth protecting. It had started with Owen Eldridge, the man who had proposed before she finished the dishes, who had loved her before he even knew her name, who had given her everything she never knew she needed. As if reading her thoughts, Owen squeezed her hand. No regrets. Not a single one, Nathaniel said. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, as the grandchildren's laughter rang through the evening air, as Owen's arms came around her in the familiar embrace of home, Nathaniel knew it was true. She had no regrets. Only gratitude for the long, winding road that had brought her here, to this moment, to this life, to this man, to love.